All right, here we are. Here we are at the Functional Forum. Thanks so much for joining us here tonight. Excited to be here. We're going to be talking about reversing cognitive decline, and it is a hot topic, as you saw there at the entry of this of the Functional Forum tonight. You'll recognize that even on CNN, they're talking about the last Alzheimer's patient. Sounds like the end of Alzheimer's, which was Dale Bredesen's famous book. And so this is having its moment in the sun. And so we're excited to talk a little bit about this tonight and share some of the exciting things that are happening in the world of cognitive decline. This is a live show. I'm really excited to be here with you tonight, and you can engage with us directly. As I shared previously, we've done a couple of shows. We were there from IFM.
Thanks so much
last month.
For watching. We've got
Here we go. We were there last month from IFM. We were there at PLMI back in May. So we're back to the live show format. If you want to ask questions, you can go to what's now X, what used to be Twitter, and you could put in hashtag Functional Forum, and we will have some questions. There'll be lots of good reasons to ask questions because we have an amazing guest live today that is right in the thick of this. I want to give a shout out to the Functional Forum meetup groups. In fact, the reason why this isn't next Monday is next Monday I'm going to be with the Northern Colorado community meetup group. We're going to be doing an event, a picnic in Fort Collins, Colorado next Monday, which I'm very excited about, getting to see some practitioners who have been running that group for almost 10 years. So get to say hi to some old friends and to connect with some new ones. So I'm excited about that. Share what we're going to be doing at that event is VagusFest. And if you have been following along, you know this is a new concept that we've been bringing out recently, which is on activating the vagus nerve, a patient experience, a community based participatory education event for practitioners to put on for their community. And we've been trying it. We did it at the IFM event. We've done 4 now, actually. And I'm excited to show with you all the first preview of the VagusFest. So check this out. This is our first promo video. Here we go. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to VagusFest. There we go. There's the promo. So we have about 30 clinics that have written in and said they want to run a VagusFest. And we're super excited to be sharing the tools that will allow any practitioners to do it. We're hoping that community meetup groups will want to do it for practitioners. Later in the year, I'm going to be doing a VagusFest at the Integrated Medicine for Mental Health conference, which is in October, the 10th to the 13th. We're also going to be doing it at the Mexican Association of Lifestyle Medicine, which is the next week in October. So this is really taking off because I think people want participatory education, even at the practitioner level. We've all sat in a million lectures, and there's something about the embodiment that makes perfect sense when you're trying to deliver participatory medicine, and I'm glad that it's resonating. And this is the year of unity, after all, here at the Evolution of Medicine, and at VagusFest, we are uniting mind, body, and community, and we could all do with a little bit of that. So let's talk about reversing cognitive decline. So this is a topic that we've talked a little bit about on the Functional Forum over the years. We went to the 2017 IFM annual conference, and we had Dr. Dale Bredesen there. We actually did an event with him, and it was amazing. And we've had people from this area over the years. Dr. Mark Menelosino has been on. We've had many different physicians who have been on the sort of the cutting edge of this conversation. We've had Dean Ornish on, and Dean Ornish at that point was talking about heart disease. And as you're going to see here in a minute, Dr. Ornish has turned his attention of his lifestyle medicine protocol towards cognitive decline. And just to give you a little bit of a feeling for what the protocol entails and how it works and how his work is delivering on that, which was the topic of the first video that we showed at the top of the hour. I'm going to take you back to a 3-minute introduction to this that was shown last year on TV. So check this out.
It's a devastating disease and one that has no cure. But doctors are testing a new theory and looking at 4 key lifestyle changes that might one day prevent or reverse Alzheimer's disease. News 4's Jimmy Olabanji has a closer look at the research.
Can Alzheimer's disease be prevented or potentially even reversed without medicine or surgery? It's a theory being tested in a clinical trial led by Dr. Dean Ornish.
For the last 45 years, I've directed research showing that simple lifestyle changes, what we eat, how we respond to stress, how much exercise we get, and how much love and social support we have, can not only help prevent but often reverse the progression of the most common and costly chronic diseases.
Dr. Ornish started the nonprofit Preventative Medicine Research Institute in California and is a professor of medicine at the University of California, San Francisco. Through previous studies, he found that lifestyle changes can reverse heart disease in some patients, and he's now seeing if it works in the fight against Alzheimer's too.
And what's good for your heart is good for your brain. We know that Alzheimer's and heart disease share many of these same underlying biological mechanisms.
Healthy eating and exercise have been shown to reduce the risk of cognitive decline and dementia, but this research takes it a step further to see if it can actually prevent or reverse the disease. Dr. Ornish says the 4 principles break down like this.
So it's essentially a whole foods plant-based diet: fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, soy products, ideally as close to as they come in nature as possible, minimally processed, low in fat, low in sugar. Moderate exercise, walking, half an hour a day for an hour 3 times a week with some strength training, meditation and other yoga-based stress management techniques, and support groups, or spending time with your friends and family and loved ones. Or to reduce it to its essence, to eat well, move more, stress less, and love more. That's it.
And while the results of the trial aren't expected until next year, others in the field are watching closely. Dr. Jessica Caldwell is with the Women's Alzheimer's Movement Prevention Center at Cleveland Clinic in Las Vegas, a first-of-its-kind facility geared just for women and Alzheimer's disease prevention. She says if you only have time to do one thing to keep your mind sharp, it's not crossword puzzles. Instead, she encourages her patients to get moving.
Physical exercise directly impacts the brain right away as well as for months afterward. It changes the levels of your neurochemistry that supports memory. When we exercise, it improves our mood, it can reduce our stress levels.
It's the same thing Dr. Ornish preaches as he teams up with leading neurologists across the country, including Harvard, to put this new theory to the test.
Our unique contribution has been to be using these very high-tech, expensive, state-of-the-art scientific measures to prove how powerful these very simple and low-tech and low-cost interventions can be.
More than 6 million Americans are living with Alzheimer's disease. According to doctors, the disease starts actually decades before a person actually develops any memory loss or other symptoms.
All right, well, that was a good primer. And look, just to take a moment to appreciate, this would never have been on TV 10 years ago. This is a big deal, and it's a big deal for, I think, the whole movement in general. And, the fact that potentially millions of people can see that it is reversible and that you need that sort of support is very exciting, because as people who watch this show know, chronic disease being reversible is something that we're all excited about and that not many people really know about. And so this is a really exciting moment. So I'm here today. I'm going to welcome our very special guest. We have Dr. Kristine Burke here with us live today. Hey, Dr. Burke, good to see you.
Hello, James. Great to see you.
Becoming a regular on the functional forum. If we're not talking about uric acid and my gout, now we're talking about my father's dementia. So I really have valued you as a thinker, and over our 10-year relationship, and I'm really excited to talk about this because you are right in the middle of it. So let's just start there. How is it that a non-neurologist is involved in one of these, groundbreaking clinical trials in Alzheimer's and dementia?
Yeah, that's a great question. I was actually thinking that as I was watching that last video, like, how did I end up here? I think, as family physicians, we deal with all phases of life, and we're the ones on the front line when these memory changes and cognitive changes start to occur in our patients. And then we're often the ones that are managing the family dynamics that go around these diseases, because it's really challenging. It's really hard on the families. And so, I personally have been impacted by this disease in my family. Both my great aunt and my great uncle both passed from Alzheimer's. And then this past year, I lost my aunt, who I had been very close to in childhood. And so it impacts me directly. And I was at the 2017 IFM International Conference at the event that you had with Dale, and watching that and learning how it's possible to change the course of this disease was really something that just felt very empowering to me. And I dug in and started doing that work right away.
Amazing. And so then now you're one of the 6 investigators for this dementia reversal trial. And I know that I know Craig Tanio, and I know Anne Hathaway and Kat Toops, and a couple of others who are involved in it, David Hussey. How did you end up getting chosen to be part of that trial?
So for years, they've been collecting data in the Bredesen recode, which is now operated by Apollo Health. And so they had outcomes data on who was able to get the best results. And so as a result of that, I was on Dr. Bredesen's radar as being effective at delivering this kind of care. And so that's how I was selected.
Amazing. Well, we'll talk more about that later on, because I know you're in the middle of it, and I know you can't share things about it, but certainly can share, sort of some of the what makes up. I want to talk about Dr. Ornish's trial, because I guess maybe before we get into the details of it, I think we should just first of all a deep bow for Dr. Ornish. Not only in the heart disease, which I know is very near and dear to your heart as well, but just the grind that it takes to execute on this kind of thing is significant. And I think we all owe a debt of gratitude, whether it be his heart disease, and now he's also very good on getting on TV and speaking in amazing sound bites. And that is not something that you just are suddenly good at. Like he's a professional, and I have so much respect for the way that he's able to push the whole field forward.
Absolutely. And I mean, really, this is one of the first trials to show that intensive therapeutic lifestyle change can alter the course of cognitive decline. And that's as a prospective study. So that's groundbreaking.
Tell me a little bit about, the sort of state of Alzheimer's treatment outside of lifestyle and functional medicine, and why this is so important.
Yeah, so I think, those of us in the functional medicine space are probably all aware that the anti-amyloid drugs, that there have been several now, for a 5th one just approved today, they all have had minimal impact on the progression of the disease. None have been able to accomplish any improvement in symptoms. So all we're doing is slightly diminishing the rate of decline, but at very, very high risk. Aduhelm had a brain bleed rate that was hovering around 30%. That's one of the reasons that it's not available now after just being approved, what was it, a year ago, I think. So this focus on what I kind of term ripping off the Band-Aid, without the focus on reversing the root causes of the neurodegenerative disease in the first place, I think that's why we're not seeing the outcomes that we want to see in the drug arena. Now, in the precision medicine arena, precision and functional medicine, the pilot study that Dr. Bredesen and Kat Toops and Anne Hathaway did, that showed an 84% of the people in that trial were able to improve. In Dr. Ornish's study, he was able to get 10 of the 24 to improve, and then another 7 that were stable, which is still remarkable because the natural history of this disease is decline. So all of these people, all of these studies have been really remarkable in showing that we can improve cognition rather than just holding it steady or slowing the rate of decline.
If I hear what you're saying and sort of put I guess contextualize it, it sounds like there is a subsection of patients, which may be probably more, quite a few, that are able to change their lifestyle and have a significant improvement in their cognitive decline from lifestyle. It seems to me that that's not that, we kind of knew that. I mean, the finger study more than 10 years ago showed that, right?
Right.
And that was what, 45%? So that's about the same there with Dr. Ornish's improvement there.
Yep.
But when you say 85%, and obviously you look at those numbers, I guess the question is, because I know your program is built on lifestyle changes. I mean, I've never seen you eat a veal cutlet in the last 5 years. But tell me what's happening to those other patients in your practice that maybe where the lifestyle medicine isn't making the impact?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think we all know that we can accomplish significant health change with the therapeutic lifestyle basics. And all of those things help reduce inflammation. They provide the building blocks that we need to heal and be healthy. But that's only one piece of the puzzle, because the other piece of the puzzle is you have to remove and resolve the things that are causing brain degeneration in the first place. And you don't necessarily accomplish that just with the lifestyle changes. So as you can see in the statistics that we just talked about, for some people, that's enough. That will accomplish improvement. But for the majority of people, that's not quite enough. And that's the next phase of treatment that we really want to bring about, and to have that be the way that we address Alzheimer's and some of these other neurodegenerative diseases.
Are some of those causes like common amongst, the practitioners who will be watching this, who are doing functional medicine in the field, or are these things that are specific to cognitive decline?
No, they are common things like chronic infections, unresolved infections, viral reactivation, tick-related infections. The herpes simplex virus has been recovered from the amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's patients at autopsy. We also know that mold exposure, especially in some people who seem to be particularly vulnerable to the toxicity of the mycotoxins, the biologic toxins that the molds create to try to outcompete in their environment. So we have mold toxicity, then we have our hormone replacement. We have to have balanced hormones. We have to be bringing exercise in to stimulate the production of BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, so that we're telling the brain that it needs to grow new connections, that it needs to maintain the health of the neurons that it has. So there's a wide variety of things. Those are just some examples that we need to be addressing, so that we're, in the words of David Jones, the gets and the rids, right? We're getting rid of the things that are creating damage, and we're getting the things that we need to be able to create an environment where the body can heal. And that's that lifestyle foundation.
We have a question here coming on Twitter from Heather Gray. She says, what type of practitioners do you think would be capable of executing on these types of protocols?
I think what you and I were talking about earlier, the main pieces that we want to be able to get out to the majority of people, like you can see from Dr. Ornish's trial, with therapeutic lifestyle change, with which any of us in this space, any functional medicine provider is capable of providing, we can help almost half of the people. And then you would be able to recognize whether those people that you're working with are benefiting from the interventions, or if they need more help. And then that should be elevated to the next level practitioner, maybe a physician or a nurse practitioner or a PA who's been trained in reversing cognitive decline.
Okay, well, we'll get to the training and where you can go and get trained. What I want to do now actually is share a little clip from a podcast that I've actually recorded that hasn't come out yet. So Heather Sandison is a naturopathic doctor, originally trained, but has also now made it into this world, and I know has worked extensively with Dr. Bredesen as well. She has a book that just came out called Reversing Alzheimer's. And interestingly, Heather has not just done this in her, or Dr. Sandison has not just done this in her practice, but has also created an inpatient facility, which I think is quite innovative. So we're going to take a moment here and just share a little bit from that interview to get a flavor for her work. Let me cue this up here now. Let's just start from the beginning. Like, you're a naturopathic doctor. This is not the easiest part of medicine by any means. How did you end up, getting sucked into the Alzheimer's world?
I went and did my naturopathic training and heard over and over again from well-meaning and well-educated instructors, other providers, that there was nothing you could do for Alzheimer's or dementia. And also for autism, really, it was on that spectrum of these kind of neurodegenerative diseases, these neurological issues that we really were in this black box. If there's nothing we can do, and to suggest that there's hope is to give people false hope. And there are doctors now calling this false hopelessness, because the opposite is actually true. It's not that there's nothing we can do. No one should be told that at this stage. There's actually an overwhelming amount of things that we can do to optimize cognitive function at any stage. What got me excited was hearing Dr. Dale Bredesen, my mentor, speak at a conference, at a mental health conference. He was saying that you could reverse this. And at this point, he had published case studies. So there were some case series, some case studies, but there wasn't a controlled trial. There wasn't a trial that had happened that was really driving this home from a research perspective. It was in these early stages. Yet the concepts made so much sense to me. What he basically was saying was, if you take a complex system like the brain, you don't think, oh, misfolded proteins are the problem. You think, is there enough resource? Is there enough energy? Is there a toxic intervention with optimal function? Is there infectious burden? Is there some sort of stressor causing this degenerative process? And when you stack all of the functional medicine interventions on top of each other, these naturopathic philosophies on top of each other, what you get is better cell function and a reversal of the disease process. Now, it can spiral in the other direction. It can go downhill too. If you have high toxic burden, high infectious burden, poor nutrient status, diabetes, if you've got high stressors, if you don't have enough social connection, if you're isolated, if you're not getting good sleep, these things can all stack in a negative direction, and you can increase significantly your rates of cognitive decline. And so these concepts and ideas, they're common sense, just uncommon practice. And when we started to put them into practice, I'll speak for myself, there's a community of other brain docs out there doing the same thing. But when I started to put this into practice in my office, I watched people get better. And yes, we were discussing the complexity, the family dynamics, the emotional dynamics, the expense, the cost, the resource, both time and money that it takes to implement this. But when someone says, I got my mom back, I mean, how do you stop? How do you not continue doing the work?
Yeah, it's really amazing to bring someone back, right? It's one thing to prevent. It's another thing to like see the lights come on again. And I know that that can be kind of addictive for clinicians, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, absolutely. It's why I get up in the morning. And it's also this, I think when I saw it happen for some of the first patients, I thought, gosh, if this is happening for Linda, one of my first patients who had severe Alzheimer's, like if this is possible for her, what about everybody else who doesn't have severe disease yet? There's so much suffering that we can prevent.
Mm. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about a phrase that I've been hearing recently that I think is interesting is dementia denial, right? The idea that like, some of these early symptoms are on the dementia spectrum, but are sort of like laughed off as a natural part of aging. And that, in order to like really get hold of this, we need to own a little bit more of that, or have that become, part of a meme in society, that this is the beginning of something that you can stop or you can turn around.
Yeah, I think the problem is that the narrative has been that there's nothing you can do. And still, I have patients show up in my office and they say, we went to neurology and he took away my driver's license, told me to come back in 6 months, gave me some medications that he said wouldn't work very well, and, get your affairs in order. there's nothing that can be done. And patients are still told that. And so, of course, they don't want to go in and see someone, and they want to, it serves them to be in denial. So I think that there are two things that go on, right? One, denial because it's shameful. It feels shameful, especially for people who've depended on their intellect for their livelihood or for their identity. To imagine that they're headed in this direction is just, they can't go there. And then there's also, I think, a reality to the brain degeneration affecting self-awareness. So I think that there are people who really do think, they're on this neurodegenerative spectrum, and they are thinking that they have the cognitive capacity that they used to, just because they lack self-awareness because that part of the brain has been damaged.
All right, well, let's jump into talking a little bit about that. First of all, Kristine, I'd love to just get your take on that. I've heard some of those exact words come out of your mouth, so I know that there's a lot of resonance there, right?
Yeah, Heather and I know each other actually quite well, and we've had many conversations around this. And yes, you have heard many of those same things come out of my mouth. I think, it really is true what she's saying, that if the whole construct around you is that there's nothing you can do, and finding this out just means you're on this inevitable path of decline, then why would you want to find out? So that messaging is really important for us to get out, because it's exactly as she said, there are a myriad of things that we can do that improve brain health and improve cognitive function, but you have to know that that exists.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess, it must be even more frustrating for the patient then, that they would have an interaction with a neurologist like you just heard, but they've just watched Sanjay Gupta on TV, or they've just watched the HBO special where they've seen other people reversing it. How much of the frustration is caused by this sort of like it's out there, but it's not evenly distributed, or actually there's very little capacity, would you say?
Yeah, I think all of those things are true. And I think there just really is this big disconnect. I mean, for example, we're enrolling for the randomized clinical trial for a precision medicine approach to reversal of cognitive decline. I have not received a single referral from a neurologist in this area, not one. Even though I've reached out to them, I've shared with them what we're doing, I've shared with them the results of the pilot study, but I don't know if they have a piece of that denial as well, that it just seems too good to be true. Like their entire career tells them otherwise. And so they can't even imagine that this is possible. But it is really a problem with neurologists not being aware that there are things that we can do that have been published and are in the literature.
I mean, when you talk about the energy that Dr. Sandison was talking about there, of the lights coming back on, I can imagine if you're a neurologist and you haven't experienced that, it would be kind of like, I can imagine how this would, the whole topic could be extremely challenging for a doctor who has yet to see that happen.
Yeah. And I think, also in that setting, they're not typically seeing the patient very often. They're seeing them maybe once or twice a year, and they're seeing, hundreds of patients in between. They may not really remember what that's like, but we're working with these people day in and day out. So when someone comes in and and we've all seen this, just that blankness in their eyes, like you can't connect with the soul of the person that used to be there. When you see that change and you have that spark of connection in their eyes, like it gives me goosebumps even now. It's just what Heather said, like you can't imagine doing anything else once you've seen that that's possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we talk a little bit about something that Dr. Sandison mentioned that I'd love to get your take on? This sort of like identity, right? She mentioned that a little bit about how you almost have to change your identity. I think this is something that I think is underplayed a little bit in functional medicine, but is, mission critical. It's one of the reasons when we were doing Heal Community that really the first part of the group visit was always about like questioning people's identity, because a lot of times the identity was of a sick person or a chronically ill person. And I can imagine in this situation, especially if you say like it's taken 10 years or 20 years to happen and it's happened slowly, at what point does this just become part of your personality? I'm forgetful. I'm a forgetful person, as opposed to, and I guess, what do you do in your practice to shift that identity?
Yeah, that's, oh my goodness, that is really a challenge. And we're definitely running into that in the reversal trial because we have such a short period of time that we're working with people. So to shift them from this concept of these are all the things that I have become, and I've been told that there's no hope, to there's hope, and maybe I can be the person I was before. That's a big shift, and that takes a lot of support around them, the family support, our health coach and dietitian, like all of our team supporting them to help them make that transition. But I think it really only happens when they start to feel like who they were before. And that's one of the things that people will often say, I feel like myself again. I think I've had 3 of my study subjects already say that to me. And so that's when you really know that you're getting in there and you're making a difference. And then that's when you start to see the momentum pick up, because now they have the belief that it's possible too.
Awesome. What is unique about the brain that sort of makes it maybe more tricky to bring back to function as opposed to maybe other organs and systems in functional medicine where there's, I guess, more more
Or resilience.
consistent success or resilience? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for a long time, the paradigm was that once the brain is injured, that it doesn't heal at all. Like we have all the cells we're going to have when we're born, and that's all that happens, and we can't repair the brain. And so the whole concept of neuroplasticity over the last couple of decades has really shifted that. And that's created this window of possibility. We can grow new connections. We can improve the synapses. I tell patients when I'm working with them that, their Alzheimer's or their cognitive decline is a bit like having had an earthquake in the brain. And now we have all these roads that have been disrupted and buildings that have fallen down. And so you can't reach that memory that you had anymore because that road is damaged. But we can build a new path to that memory and you can get back to it. So it's all this concept of neuroplasticity that really creates the realm in which this work is possible.
Okay. And how is that evolving, and how do you stay up to date with all the different things? Because it seems like there's a million ads for all these different things, from from an app that's like brain training right through to, different supplements or otherwise. How do you sort of look to contextualize, or even therapies, hyperbaric oxygen and, all these things? How do you sort of stay on top of what goes into your protocol?
Yeah, that's a really challenging part of this. I'm a member of a group of people, Heather, and a brain board that is following the research and looking at these things. There are a number of things that can be done that will give temporary improvement. And one of the things that we hope eventually to parse out is what are the things that give us lasting improvement, which as opposed to what are the things that will give us in the moment improvement, and are some of those things that could give us lasting improvement if we positioned them at a different place in the journey of that person's reversal of neurodegeneration. And all of these are still research questions to be answered. We've got some subgroup analysis that we're planning in the current study so that we can look at some of the things that I've mentioned, but there are so, the first thing that we have to do is just be able to prove that this is possible prospectively in a randomized controlled trial. And we're still enrolling subjects in the study. 5 of our sites still have subject spots that are available. So if anybody out there is listening and you know someone or you have a family member that this could benefit, there's just a few criteria. You need to live within an hour of one of our 6 research sites, and those are all available on the reversal trial website, which is dementiareversaltrial.com. So easy to remember. We did that on purpose. And then the age range is from age 45 to 76 at the time of enrollment. And then they have to have mild cognitive impairment or early Alzheimer's disease. So we focus it on those groups for this particular trial, not because we don't think we can help people that are more advanced, but we just wanted to have a consistent group so that our statistical analysis would be better powered.
What happens if this works? Like, how does it affect the field if this trial were to be successful?
I think if this trial is successful, it's going to be a landmark study, and it's going to have to change the entire paradigm of thought around this disease.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, we look forward to following up. And I think it is an amazing opportunity for anyone who's out there. Maybe you're a practitioner and you have a patient that you're thinking about that hasn't been able to get the outcomes that you'd hope for. If you are in Florida or Ohio or Tennessee or California, make sure to go and check out that site. And yeah, I think it's a really important thing for the field. I want to switch tack a little bit because since you and I started talking about this, I've had it come extremely close to home, and I've shared a little bit about this, on social media. But my father, first of all, his mother had Alzheimer's for 10 years. So I from age 11 to 21, I think for me, or maybe age 11 to 18 anyway, I experienced it firsthand with my grandmother, but also through my dad's eyes, where, even though he's a twin, which might make it difficult, like, she couldn't tell the kids apart, and it was very difficult, for her. And that was, very challenging. And then, I'd started to notice last summer some sort of changes in gait, right? And the shuffling of the feet has been a few years now, but like just a loss of function, motor function, I would say, just a little like slower. We were in London last year, sort of recognized that maybe public transport was no longer an option. I'd seen some of that. And then, we had a conversation last summer where I said, look, if you really want to make your way back, this is what's going to happen. And it was kind of like Dean Ornish there. My dad has plenty of social support, right? But I think his diet is a bit wonky. But I would say the exercise thing was the thing that I really focused on with him. And I think, he did go to the gym, but he wasn't doing any weight training. It was just sort of a little like treadmill stuff. And so we talked about it. And then when he went home, it was a very wet, very cold winter in Cape Town. And as I speak to him, almost every day, and I would say between August and November last year, most of the times that I would call, which is first thing in the morning California time, he'd be in bed and he'd be like, oh, it's cold. I didn't really feel like going out and so forth. And I was like, I thought this is not ideal, but got my own life and, getting on with it. And then, in December, there was what I can only really describe as a really acute cognitive declines, where a friend had taken him out for lunch and he couldn't remember his PIN number and he didn't really know where he was. And it was sort of an acute moment. And I remember hearing that and calling you and you sharing some advice with me. And I just love for you maybe to like recall that. And, what was it about what I said that gave you an insight into what was going on? And yeah, I'd love to just, to unpack that a little bit.
Yeah, so typically with this progression, we see this rather slow, gradual decline over time until we reach a certain point, and then it starts to accelerate. So once we get into, the watershed point is around early Alzheimer's to moderate, and at that point, then it starts to progress more quickly, but not like this quickly, like what you've described. It's still, a slow process over several years, as anybody who's lived through it knows. But you described this acute change, this sudden change. And then, of course, with the wet winter and all of the things that you were describing, it just made me think that there was likely either an infectious origin or an exposure origin, acute exposure. And so we talked about the possibility of there being mold and the toxins from the mold creating an acceleration of the brain decline.
Yeah. Well, so then I flew to South Africa on a moment's notice. I went to see my dad in a friend's house. My friend had taken him home and he was living in the spare bedroom basically. And, then I said hello. I mean, I've only, it looked like death was imminent to me at this moment because, not awake, lying in bed, not able to communicate with me, kind of knew that I was there, but could only kind of grunt. And, that said to me, like, this is, like coming, that this is the end. And I went straight away to his apartment, and straight away when I walked in, I was like, it smells moldy. I know how that smells. And I could actually see it on the wall, like black mold. And now that I took some of his friends there, I just think like there was probably circulation issues. There was a couple of windows that were probably should have been shut were open, and windows that were probably open should have been shut. So it was just kind of like a realization that, oh, okay, I see what's going on here. And it was just so obvious. And there also wasn't another infection. We ended up going to see incredible doctors there, and they were like, there was no real other sign of an infection that had come along. And, at that moment, it was really interesting because, for the next 2 weeks, we were sort of all in, pastoral end of life care, right? Where it was, okay, hardly any conversation, like bowels shutting down, system shutting down or otherwise. And I actually went to very, very good friends of mine who I grew up with. Actually, the lady who I'm staying with, she married me and my wife, and we're by the ocean in a nice house. And I'm there for 2 weeks next to him, sort of saying my final goodbye as though this is it. And towards the end of that second week, I kind of saw things happening, like things that hadn't happened before. So he was getting care, and there's like a bowel movement. And then, sort of like, I wouldn't say the lights turning on, but we were starting to have a little bit of conversation. And at that moment, it became clear to me that he didn't have a terminal illness. And it was clear to the doctor who came in, like there wasn't anything there that was going to kill him. And so then it was just sort of like, well, here we are. And since then, he's moved into a frail care facility and has continued on his pathway towards recovery, and is now having PT and learning to walk again and walking with a walker, and like up and down can text me on WhatsApp, and can leave me voice messages. And I would say it is up and down. It's not linear, but certainly things moving in the right direction. And that's a combination of care, of love, of the connection, of many of the things that Dr. Ornish is speaking about there, but also not being in the moldy environment. And I guess it's so interesting because, ultimately I came around like saying those kind of things to a number of doctors there. It didn't tweak for anyone that would be a possible cause. And yet you were able to predict it from, half the world away, never having seen my dad as a patient. And I just love for you to speak into, what that says, I guess, about the state of medicine.
Yeah, I think, one of the things that we're taught in functional medicine, right, is that when were you last well, or what was the event after which things seemed to change or things seemed to fall apart. And so thinking about, approaching everything with that mindset just completely changes your perspective on people's health. Because it isn't just that these things happen. They happen because of either a confluence, an overload of problems that have been accumulated, or something tosses the apple cart, and then you have this problem that develops. And so I think we just aren't really taught to think like that in conventional medicine for whatever reason. We're just taught to identify the diagnosis, and we just accept that the diagnosis in chronic disease, I'm talking only, right? Obviously in acute illness, it's different, but we're just taught to accept the diagnosis and then to move forward from that point on. And so there's never this looking back upstream, or not never, but there's rarely this looking back upstream to try to figure out what set it all in motion, because we accept that as we age, what is aging but an accumulation of insults to the body, and we either have the resources to resolve them or we don't. And so when you look at everything from that perspective, then it all becomes manageable and modifiable.
Yeah. The exposome, right?
Yes, the exposome.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, yeah, super interesting. So I guess one question that's come in is tell us about some of the key biomarkers that you look at to understand the picture. Like if you could only have 5 or 10 biomarkers, what would be the ones that you would want to look at to understand? And I know that's a loaded question and you probably don't like it.
Yeah, there are no 5 or 10 biomarkers ever. Well, but there are some interesting ones that are coming out. Maybe I'll start talking about those. So we now have 5 different brain biomarkers that we've really only gotten access to in about the last year. So that is a really exciting turn of events. So 2 of them are phosphorylated tau markers. So if you know about the pathophysiology or the disease development of Alzheimer's, it has to do with the amyloid plaques and the expansion of the amyloid and the damage that does to the brain. And then the tau tangles within the axons, which in the neurons, which damage the way the nerves can communicate. And that's a simplification, but that's kind of the current wisdom, although there is a lot of dispute and discussion over that. But if we just accept that at its face value, so we can now measure this phosphorylated tau, either phosphorylated at the 181 location or at the 217 location. Both are available at Quest and LabCorp. The 217 is believed to be more sensitive, so we're less likely to get a false positive in that, but those give us information about the damage to the tau, the support structure within the axon, and the expansion of the amyloid indirectly, because that's believed to be what causes that damage. We can also look at the amyloid beta 40-40 ratio. So looking at the shift in the types of amyloid that are present. For a long time, we were able to measure that in the CSF, but that required a spinal tap. And now we can measure it in the blood. And so those things together can give us a pretty good sense through blood biomarkers that we are on the path, that we are developing Alzheimer's disease. There's a couple of other ones. One is called neurofilament light. That's a less specific to Alzheimer's disease than the other three markers that I just mentioned, but that's looking at damage to the neurons themselves, or I'm sorry, the axons themselves. So you can see elevation of that in things like head trauma or concussion. It is being used now to monitor concussion healing for return to play in sports. And so that's useful for just damage to the brain tissue in and of itself. And then the last one is called GFAP or GFAP, glial fibrillary acidic protein. And so that has to do with the astroglial cells, so the kind of the cleanup crew. And so that can give us information about the activation of the damage recovery molecules, or the damage recovery cells, I mean. So all 5 of those brain markers are really helpful in starting to understand where that brain is in the process. So the p-tau markers and the amyloid beta and the neurofilament light, those are all readily available at our big national labs. So we can be looking at those. Then we want to be looking at inflammatory markers. We want to be looking at blood sugar regulation. I'm sure everyone has heard Alzheimer's referred to as type 3 diabetes. Well, that is very true, and blood sugar abnormalities can significantly contribute to brain inflammation. It is not the most common thing that we see. So it's not the big ticket. It's not the thing that's going to solve this problem. You would also want to be looking at, well, we always look at the markers of biotoxin related inflammation. So that's things like TGF-beta or transforming growth factor beta, which is a cell signal messenger, a cytokine. We all heard about cytokine storms during the COVID pandemic. So this is a cytokine, which is the way that cells communicate with each other, that is released in large amounts when the body is dealing with biologically derived toxins from things that aren't human. So molds, for example, that produce mycotoxins. The most familiar mycotoxin that we all are aware of is penicillin, right? We know that that came from a mold. So there are hundreds of these mycotoxins. Some of them are nerve toxins. Some have been purified to be used as nerve agents in biologic warfare chemicals. So these are very, very toxic chemicals, and the body responds to those with a specific communication pattern, and we can measure that.
Amazing. Well, that seems like extremely sophisticated. One of the questions that's come in, this is actually from Dr. Eddie, who's in Germany. He's wondering how can a doctor get trained? I know Dr. Kat Soups was a speaker there at the Integrative and Personalized Medicine Conference, which is in London, and she did a lecture there. But it's going to take more than an hour lecture to get into this. What is the pathway for education at this point?
Yeah, so right now, the majority of us that are working in this field have either done significant functional medicine training or have done that, plus have done training through Dr. Bredesen's program at Apollo Health, which has a training program for practitioners.
Right.
And so that really gives a very good, nice depth educational format for people to learn the different components of this. But even just learning the basics of functional medicine, learning how to apply these lifestyle interventions. Now, our lifestyle interventions are a bit different from Dr. Ornish's. He, of course, has spent his career studying low fat and a vegan derived diet. And in our work, we're using a ketogenic diet, the KetoFlex 12-3. And so those are really different approaches, and the data still remains to be seen whether whether the two dietary approaches have a significant impact on the outcomes, or if it's the other things that we're also doing in the precision medicine approach. So, but in our construct, we believe that the brain develops insulin resistance and it doesn't use glucose as a fuel well anymore. And so shifting the body to ketones as a fuel allows the brain to be adequately fueled or well fueled so that it can go about the work of getting rid of the toxins, of healing, of growing new connections, of creating new synapses, all of the things that we need it to do.
Amazing. Well, look, I guess I want to just jump into maybe where we'll end up here, which is just looking out into the future, because like obviously, you know, you have your clinic and you have your clinical trial, and let's say the clinical trial goes well. I expect it to, based on, you know, everything I know about your work and Dr. Bredesen's work, and, you know, just the skill of all those other clinicians that we've mentioned that are in the trial, and also the results that have come before. There's a lot of data that's come before, just not in a controlled study. But yet we have two major issues. One is the numbers keep going up faster and faster. And I actually read a book recently which was talking about the effect of the pandemic on the rate of Alzheimer's. And I think the social stress, plus the toxins, plus the side effects of some of the interventions and some of that, whether that be loneliness or whether it be the COVID vaccines. I think there's, you know, there's more cognitive function issues than ever before. But then on the other side, like you just told me, that this is the education pathway requires functional medicine education, then specific education. Even if I just look back at your education, seems like it's a long path there. So, I mean, if you take a step back, and maybe this is taking off your clinician hat and looking forward as just someone who cares about our movement and cares about this work happening, what do you see is going to happen for cognitive decline to be reversed at anywhere near the scale that it exists?
Yeah, it's really a big challenge, because this is the most data heavy condition that I work with, and having an enormous amount of data to synthesize and analyze on every patient means that it's extremely labor intensive. That means that it's expensive. And as Dr. Bredesen likes to say, once you have this disease, there is no inexpensive way out, because memory care costs $10,000 to $12,000 a month. So even if we can delay that by 6 months or, you know, several months, we've already gotten ahead. But I think that we need help with the data analysis. We're going to need structures around that. And I think we need to be arming clinicians with the materials that they need to make this type of work, this scale of work possible.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think as you talk about it there, you know, I think so much of so much of what you're talking about is really like, how do you identify what's going on in the specific brain in front of you? And I think some of that is just, you know, a lot of training that you've had over time, but some of it can be seen in the data and can be organized in that way too. So I look forward to that. How do you see that that practitioners can, you know, get involved? You mentioned referring to the trial. You mentioned the Apollo training. What are some other things that you see on the horizon that could be a pathway for people who are passionate about this?
That's a good question. I think that, you know, when we look at the things that we can accomplish with setting the foundation, that people can get involved just starting there. You don't have to be operating at the level of, you know, 10 or 15 years of expertise to be able to have an impact and make a difference for people. And I think, organizing around some of the tools that will be coming out with decision support and some of those things, I think are going to be really helpful for clinicians to be able to work in this field without having to have a huge depth of knowledge. That's one of the things that's kind of amazing about functional medicine, is because it's the systems biology approach. If you just focus on what the system needs, you don't necessarily have to completely understand how the person got there to help them to get better. And that's part of the magic of what we get to do.
Beautiful. And maybe where I'd like to just end it is like, one of the things that Dr. Ornish said, which I think is really powerful, and he's great at communicating this. He says we're using extremely high technology to uncover really simple medicine. And ultimately, like, if you can, whatever role that you're playing out in the community, whether it's as a physician or an allied health professional, or a health coach, or even a community organizer, the structures of, creating connection where people can, get together and start to build new healthy behaviors. I mean, I see as the model, that there could be, even in Healing Strong, which was a cancer model, that was just a volunteer thing where people who wanted to take some integrative approaches to cancer could just meet in their community and get to know each other. And I can't help but think that, whatever role you're playing, whatever type of practitioner you are, there is plenty of room for innovation in this space. Because like you said, just getting the word out, right? Getting the word out to people, showing them the kind of videos that we showed today, showing them the Ornish trial, and then showing them, other data as it comes through, can be really, really powerful. And it just takes one person to transform and revitalize the mind of a patient or a potential patient. And, I feel like it's very clear to me that this affects not just the person with the disease, but the community around it. And here I am on the other side of the world from my father, but that community, it's affecting me. But it's also, the people there who love him are, stepping in to add value even beyond the medical services. So I think everyone can play a role, whether it's family, community, or being part of this reversal system that's being built. And I just want to honor you for stepping into it. I know this probably wasn't on your life's goals maybe 10, 20 years ago, but it's funny the way that it takes you. And I just want to honor you for seeing an issue, having it touch you directly, and just stepping in to learn and now lead the way for many other clinicians. So thank you for that.
Thank you very much.
Well, this has been the Functional Forum, reversing cognitive decline. It's happening. It's exciting. It's on TV. It's happening in our communities. It's happening in our practices. I'm grateful for everyone here who is playing a part of it. I would love to see you in person. I'll give an extra shout out here for the Integrative Medicine for Mental Health Conference. That's coming in October. Dr. Bredesen will be speaking there, and I think you'll see some familiar faces there. If you choose to come, that's the 10th and the 13th of October. And until next time, thanks so much for tuning in. Next month, we are going to be taking a deep dive on men's health. That is actually something that we've never talked about in over 120 episodes of the Functional Forum. So we're going to be diving deep into that with some of the leaders in that. We're going to be talking about physical health, mental health, emotional health. It's going to be a great show. That'll be August 5th. So please join us. In the meantime, thank you, Dr. Kristine Burke. And thank you so much for tuning in. And